everybody, welcome back to the Finding Financial Fitness Show. I'm your host, Nino Gonzalez, joined today again by my co-host, Pei. How's it going?
How are you? Hi, everybody. I'm Pei, and here in Texas, same room, same background. but
Same weather almost, it seems like in Houston,
exactly,
getting into the summer months. We're actually almost at the unofficial start of the season, right? Memorial Day weekend, we're right around the corner, and
yep,
that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. A little bit of advice we would give, maybe some books we would recommend to people graduating as we're getting into graduation season, talking about both high school grads but also college grads or master's level graduates or doctoral level graduates. I think the advice in general could go to multiple people. And then with that, transitioning into the next 5 years. On our last show, we discussed kind of our goals for the next 5 years, a little bit what we're aiming to do. But today we'll discuss also some of the strategies that we're personally using to help reach our goal within the next 5 years, and some other strategies that people can use to start or continue their journey for the next 5 years.
absolutely top of mind because believe it or not, my first cohort of students from elementary school are this year
No way.
high school graduates. So I've been getting a lot of high school graduation invitation, to attend
Yeah.
and all that. So it's scary how time flies, but
Yeah.
I always, I look at these young, hopeful individuals, and I know they're going to go on to do amazing things. And I'm obviously blessed to have played a small role in their life to kind of shape them along the way. But that kind of question comes in. What I always hesitate to tell them, like, I have so much more to tell you. I have so here we are. That's part of why we have this podcast, right? I want to share some of the, lessons that we've learned along the way. And if we can impart, even 10% of the wisdom that we gain along the way, and especially on the financial part, imagine how far that would go for someone who's ready and willing to take that and run with it, right? So just kind of go back to, I know you actually just not long ago graduated university, right? What message would you give a graduate from today? Like what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's crazy. It popped up on my social media feed actually yesterday that 8 years ago to the day was my college graduation. And then today is actually 12 years from my high school graduation, right? And so obviously different timelines, right? I mean, it's only 4 years between high school graduation and college graduation, but I think the message would have been different, right? Going after college graduation, you've already gone through college, right? You've assigned a major, you've graduated in some sort of field. So typically you have a general idea of where you want to go afterwards. And for me, I was lucky enough that I had my career path chosen, which 8 years later, it's completely different, obviously, which is a good thing. But I think the biggest thing that I would tell, just starting with the college level graduates, is be open-minded, because I've met myself and other individuals who graduate college and maybe they have a general degree in psychology or in just general business or a liberal arts degree, and they're looking at the world and they're thinking, well, now I need to go get a job, and that's it. And because that's what they're told to do. So I think the number one thing that I would say is actually question, why are you going to do the things you're going to do? Why are you going to pursue that job? Why are you going to stay in your hometown? Why are you going to leave your hometown? And if you can answer those questions, I think a lot of college individuals, I think about myself in that situation, would answer two ways. One, because that's what I was told to do. And two, because I need to make money. And there's deeper questions that can go along to that. And that's where I would challenge people to start asking those questions of what am I going to do for the next 5 years? And does that fit with what my overall life goal is of what I want to achieve in life and what's going to make me happy? Because I never asked that question. It took me almost a decade to start even asking that question, right? And I had very good mentors and very good people in my life who were in my career who were leading me to be the best version of myself but that didn't necessarily, the career is one portion of your whole life. Shouldn't necessarily be your whole identity. So that's the question that I would ask. And what about you? I mean, what would you advise to the students that you taught at a young age who are now graduating high school, or people that are graduating college, that you've actually had a part to play in their growth, and you obviously you want the best for them going into their future, and you have a personal stake as well. So what's something or some things that you would want to discuss or tell them?
Oh God, there's so much, but I think number one, advice I would give any student is to not be afraid to seek out a mentor, right? along the journey of life, we've always been given teachers, right? They're assigned to you, whether you like them or not. It is what it is. But outside of that, even as a student, right? Actually, someone gave a very good advice. We went on multiple college tours, and someone actually gave a very good advice for any high school students going into freshman year. Once you get on campus, immediately seek out a junior as your mentor, right? Somebody who's just a little couple steps ahead of you, who's gone through what you're about to go through, and latch on and learn everything, especially if the person is kind of in the field that you're interested in going into. So same thing with financial, on that financial journey, right? Who do we listen to? There's all these, financial entertainers, I call them, on TV, right? You have to dig a little bit deeper and look at what they're saying. Are they saying what they're saying or teaching what they're teaching for your benefit or for their benefit, right? You got to be able to ask those critical questions, right? Just because they are popular and they have tons of following doesn't mean that they have your best interest at heart, right? They're often selling a program or some sort and kind of promising you the universe if you just follow their program. So just be aware of that. But I think finding that authentic mentor, along the way is a key component, right? You're trying to assemble almost like a team around you, right? You don't just want to go through life, first of all, alone on this journey. You're not going to go far if you are kind of just, hey, I'm going to do everything on my own. I'm not going to ask questions. Let me figure out, DIY everything, right? We kind of talked about that on last episode, which reminded me of a great book, right? Who not how.
Right.
If you don't know how to do something, you have to make a decision. Do I invest the time to become an expert in this, or do I go out and find the expert and work with them or seek advice? And so that mentorship is huge. I didn't kind of realize that until later on in life. And once I realized that, pursuing any goal in a vacuum is really a slow way, that transformed everything, which is that chapter of my book that I talk about, that the next 5 years after that, for my life, this chapter is about transformation, right? I wanted to change, kind of looking back of how I have done it, and then take the lessons that I've learned and transform the next 5 years of my life. And along the way, if I can transform other people's life, even better. So yeah, that was one thing I would find a good mentor, even academically, financially, physical fitness. Mentor and coaches are different.
Oh yeah.
Right? I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think, well, the mentor component I think is huge. There's something that I heard where I'm sure you're familiar with the whole 10,000 hours, right? You don't become a master of something until you put, quote unquote, 10,000 hours in. Now that's been a little bit debunked and whatnot, but that's kind of been the general premise, is once you put 10,000 hours, you're an expert. And something I heard recently was, instead of having to put 10,000 hours into 10 different things, pay somebody for their 10,000 hours, right? If they're an expert, an accountant, let's say, and they've put in their 10,000 hours and they're charging you a fee to do your accounting, to do your services, and you feel like, well, this fee is outrageous, right? But what does that fee entail? It's more than just what they're doing for you. It's the 10,000 hours of experience that they've had to go through that you don't have to go through, right? That's huge, paying somebody for their 10,000 hours. And I love the concept of a mentor. And something I did want to ask you about having a mentor, because I think people know the value of having a mentor, but I think it's very difficult to go out and seek a mentor, because typically the best mentors are the ones that naturally and organically form. For example, my mentor, or one of my mentors when I was going through my dietetics rotation, was my clinical director, and he was a huge mentor of mine, and I'm hoping we're actually going to have him on the show soon. He was a mentor of mine, not because of what he was doing necessarily in the field, but the way he carried himself. And he was maybe a decade older than me, but it was the way he was as a professional, but also as a person. And I realized, hey, that inspires me. Let me get closer to this person. But it wasn't as simple as like, hey, will you be my mentor? Right? Because that can put a burden on the person, because if someone asks you to be their mentor, you almost feel this responsibility for them, and you almost want everything to be perfect. And I know when that was my mentor in my nutrition field, and I've shared this with you before, but you were my mentor in the financial world. When I got into all of this, you were where I wanted to be. You were a few steps ahead of me, and you were doing things that I needed to be doing. And so naturally, I started with, hey, one phone call, and then it was a couple of phone calls, and then it was, hey, can we meet up? And naturally, I put that position where maybe you weren't the mentor, but I was going to be the mentee. Whether you knew it or not, I was going to pick your brain. Anytime I could hear you speak, anytime you would talk to anybody else, I wanted to listen because is how I wanted to learn. So for me, it's maybe not necessarily going out there and saying, will you be my mentor? But offering value to that person that you want to be your mentor, show that you have value in their lives, and they'll be willing to help you out as well. How do you feel, given I feel like you are in our community a mentor to a lot of people? How do you feel how would you like to be approached from a person coming wanting to be mentored?
I think, of course, everybody has different personalities, and obviously, you obviously have a very outgoing personality, and I am on the more like reserved side personally. So for me, the mentors that worked out best for me, I've always just first observed, right? Like I want to be in the room with them, right, and observe how they. So I do a lot of observation for.
Okay.
Whereas you're more like outgoing. You're like, hey, let me just reach out. So total different styles, which is works out fine. And by the way, you have already surpassed me as far as your accomplishments. So now people need to see you out as mentors.
Sure.
But I actually prefer the more organic way. I talk to a lot of people. I don't have like a set course or anything like that. I just like to spend time with people, right? So I can sense someone who's genuinely trying to become better. And those are the people that I want to pour into. I treat everybody when I first meet them equally, but for me, it's almost like a gut feeling when I can feel that, hey, this person is really, their mind kind of is on that wavelength and they're not just waiting for me to teach them. So if I suggest a book or I suggest a podcast, they're gonna go and pick it up and read it or listen to it and then come back and we have a good discussion that kind of can go to the next level, right? So
Yep.
For me, same way, right? If I'm listening to someone that if I notice someone, let's say at a conference or someone that I want to emulate or copy or become, I try to read whatever publication they have or if they have any podcasts, I first do a lot of research on them or stalking them a little bit. And then I see if there's a match, right? And if
Right.
there's an opportunity for me to meet them, even if it's casually like, hey, if it's someone local, to be able to just have coffee together and just learn about their story. I think if you take a genuine interest half of how they got to where they are, most people who do mentor people that I encounter, they're like sitting at home, like waiting for someone to call them.
Yep.
Like,
Well, and
why
people
do I
love
have all
talking
this
about
knowledge?
themselves.
Right. It's almost like I have all these knowledge, but nobody's coming here to ask about it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, sometimes I feel that same a little bit of frustration in a sense that I'm like, wow, I can really change your life if you would just kind of
Oh
listen.
man, you're preaching to the choir there. I feel the same way. Sometimes it does come along with imposter syndrome where I feel like, wow, I have all this knowledge that I think I can share, but then I also get intimidated where I feel like, wait, who am I to tell you, right? I'm just this person, I'm just a normal person, right? And that kind of leads us to imposter syndrome. But I think that's great. I think having a mentor is something that I learned later on, and I was able to reflect back and say, oh wow, that these two people were my mentors, and I'm glad that they were with me during those phases of my life. So I think mentorship is great for next 5 years, whether it's college graduate or not, or just you're in your 40s or 50s, planning out your next 5 years. Regardless, I think no matter what stage of life you're in, a mentor can surely be helpful. So aside from that, what else do you think besides a mentor? What else would you suggest for people for their next 5 years?
I would say be open to be kind of to be surprised that society or the world has an agenda,
Mm.
right? There's like an overall like theme here where they kind of don't want you, not they, there's some information out there, right? That is in the mass media. You're not gonna, if you don't seek it, it's not going to be there. So you have to be the information seeker, right? You have to take a proactive stance on that, right? If you just kind of be a passive receiver of information, you're not going to have any breakthrough. That's why, with nowadays with podcasts, with YouTube
Alternative
and stuff,
media.
yeah, it's tremendous amount of information, but wisdom is harder to find, right? wisdom comes with experience, and experience comes sometimes with expensive lessons. But as far as what the kind of the mass media pushes, like I'm talking about the typical like, hey, put your money in your 401k, here's the stocks. Those information are just, you have to be kind of be able to read between the lines, right? Like, who's sponsoring this Super Bowl ad, and where does the ask, right? Like, where's the money coming from to pay for this Super Bowl ad? And why are they pushing me to buy this mutual fund, right? What's it in them? Is it really for my benefit? So just being able to ask those critical questions.
Yes. So questioning the narrative is, and not necessarily in a conspiratorial way, but just more when you're given information that's mass produced by mass media, maybe questioning, okay, how is this beneficial to me? And this ties in so beautifully with nutrition. So beautifully. And I'll give you an example. In nutrition, we have what's called the RDIs, the RDAs, the recommended daily allowance for certain nutrients, right? Meaning in order to have a quote unquote healthy diet or a healthy gut, you need to eat X amount of vitamin A, X amount of vitamin E, X amount of fiber. And if you ever look on a nutrition label, it tells you the ingredients. It tells you the ingredients. It tells you how much is there. And then on the right-hand corner, you're going to see a percentage, right? You'll see, oh, okay, carbohydrates, it says 25%. Well, it's 25% based on a 2,000 calorie diet. And these are all trials that are based on what the recommended daily allowance for the general population is, right? So they take people who are 4'11", 5 foot, that weigh 110 pounds. And then they take people who are 6'7" and weigh 380 pounds. And they take the average of this and they say, this is based on a standard 2,000 calorie diet. And the reason being is because generally you can't, as a mass company or country, you can't provide guidance for every single individual person. So you have to give generalized guidelines, right? So you say generally the best thing to do is eat 20 grams of fiber for the general person. But you and I are going to completely differ on the amount of fiber that we need, or carbohydrates that we need, or calories that we need. So it's not necessarily that you're questioning, oh, this is all wrong on the nutrition label or the 401k or the financial advice, but how can this information pertain to me directly? And look in the mirror, both physically in the nutrition question, but also financially in the financial question. Okay, I'm 6'2" and I weigh 280, 2,000 calorie diet, and I'm a very active individual. 2,000 calories is not going to be enough to sustain my muscle mass. I need to eat probably 1.5 times or 2 times that. So take what you have, get that information, but then apply it to yourself and ask the question, how can I morph this to fit me? So I think that's a fantastic way is questioning it in your lens and how it could fit your life. Love it.
Right. Yeah. It's not challenging the norm. It's more just thinking critically, and also just, even like you say, right, nutritional wise, you gotta have a personal plan, right? There's a general advice out there that we all agree to, right? You gotta be financial or fit in fitness, and financial kind of correlates. You gotta be responsible, right, with your money and with your exercise and taking care of yourself, right? So that same theme applies. So everybody has that baseline. Now, what do you do with that baseline, right? To be above average. And I would assume our listeners all want to be above average. Otherwise, you're not here. Well, otherwise, you would not be here. You would not be continuing. You want to be above average. You're not looking to retire at 65 and kind
Hoping
of
on Social Security.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You're not looking to collect Social Security. You're looking to do something way beyond. You're looking for a certain type of lifestyle. You're looking for a certain type of level of mental wellness and physical fitness, and that's why you're here. So how do you get that personalized plan, right? How do you look at yourself and say, like, okay, how do I put together a customized plan for myself?
Yeah, and that ties into kind of my third. So we have mentorship, number one, right? We have, in no particular order, mentorship, thinking critically, right? Asking questions that pertain to yourself and identifying a plan. And the third thing that I was actually going to mention, which answers this question, is identifying your identity. So I mentioned in one of our previous episodes a book that I had read called Love Life by Matthew Hussey. Just came out, and again, it is geared towards a relationship book, but it has you look in before you can then look out for a partner. And one of the things that they talk about in that book is what's called, I love the terminology, the identity matrix, right? And what that means is your identity is made up of multiple characteristics, right? So someone's identity might be their job, Their number one identity is, okay, I'm a doctor first and foremost. Okay. But then I'm also a husband or a wife. Okay. But then I also volunteer at my church. Okay. So you have all these different identities that make up who you are. And what the identity matrix does is you first write down all of your identities. So let's say you have 10 to 12 that fully get your identity from that's who you are. If it's not one thing, it's the other. And then what you do is you categorize those in boxes, one big matrix, by the significance and the importance of it. So for me, let's say my number one thing is I am a dietitian by trade. Okay, maybe that's going to be my biggest box. But then second after that, I'm an investor. Okay, so that box might be a little bit smaller. Or maybe it's the same because maybe I'm 50-50. But then after that, it's my relationship with my spouse. Okay, that's going to be there. Then I like to travel. So that's going to be a smaller box. So what you do is you create all these different boxes by size, and then you look at the overall big picture, and that is your identity matrix. And you see, okay, where am I getting my major source of my identity? And then you ask the troubling question, which is, what happens if that source of my identity is taken away, right? What if I can't not be a dietitian anymore? What happens if I can't practice financial literacy anymore? Okay, well, imagine you take that box out. Well, then you have to find your identity in the other boxes. But if that one identity is so big that it takes up your whole matrix or 95% of it, then you're relying on that solely give you happiness and to bring you fulfillment. So it's really important that you have different sources in life to generate your fulfilled identity. And that ties into the question of how to personalize it. How do I know what fits for me? Well, you have to ultimately ask the end goal, both in finance and in fitness. Okay, where do I want to end up? Okay, so let's go down the fitness route. You mentioned in one of the previous episodes, somebody wants to lose 20 pounds. Okay, why? Why do you want to lose 20 pounds? Well, I think that if I lose 20 pounds, it will lead to me feeling better. I'll get off my medication and I'll be able to do more activities that I enjoy, such as hiking or walking with my dogs, whatever it is. Well, those are your goals. Those are your goals. And then you reverse engineer it. Same thing with fitness. Okay, I know that if I have $5,000 a month of passive income coming in, I can move to part-time, and that will free up more time to spend time with my family or go and walk the dog or go to the gym or whatever your activity or hobby is. But you need to identify that identity first. And there's always rooms for improvement. You could say, okay, well, this is my current identity matrix, but I want it to be this. Well, then you start adding things to your identity matrix. And then every day when you're setting out for your schedule, you set aside time for what you want your new identity to be, so that if God forbid something were to happen to one part of your identity, you have all these other pieces that you can turn to give you a fulfilling life. So that's something that I think is huge that I would recommend people to do, is find out about, and this can happen at any age, learn about yourself, try different experiences that you might not enjoy, but you don't know. Try it out. And if you find that you genuinely enjoy it, continue to do it. And maybe that becomes part of your identity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that ties back to that whole, advice to the graduates, right? Don't get so tunnel visioned into just
Yep.
that major or that job that you're gonna get. There's so much more beyond your job identity. When I left being a teacher, I struggled for a couple years. I don't know what to say. I kind of stay away from parties because I'm like, I don't know how do I
Yeah.
introduce myself? And that really was a struggle. And that was because I probably didn't have my identity properly aligned with my goals, right? So
Yep.
so that took a while for me to kind of realign and come back and feel more confident in telling people, yeah, I don't have a job, and that's not a bad thing.
You're right.
My identity is not what I do or to trade my time with. Like, my identity is now so much more robust, right? Diverse, robust. I do so many things. I do the podcast with you. I do so many other things besides just that one thing that I trade 8 hours of my day for.
Yep.
And that I think is super important as far as fulfillment. Later on in life, when you realize that you are just so much more than your job.
Well,
So
because
much
think about what happens when people go the traditional route and they get in a job right after college. That is their career, and they work, and maybe not as much in today's world, but I know from like my parents' generation or my grandparents' generation, where they would work at a company for 40 years and then they retire 65 when they're supposed to. Social Security, have their retirement benefits coming in. But what happens? They don't work anymore. They try golfing for a week and then they realize, I can't do this. I miss my job. And it's not that they missed the job, it's that their identity was so wrapped up in their job that without it, they don't know who they are, because they've
Mhm.
spent 40 years not their only identity was their job. And what happened? Their job was taken away. So you end up seeing people going back to work at that age, not because they necessarily miss it or they desire it, but that's because their identity was so wrapped up in that. And I think the sooner you can find newer identities for yourself, the better prepared you'll be. We always hear about the word retirement, right? And people associate that. When I think of retirement, I think of not working, no responsibilities, and just relaxing. But for most people, I don't think that, if they genuinely ask themselves, I don't think most people want to retire in that sense for the rest of their lives. I think retirement should mean, and for some people it does mean, doing things that make them feel fulfilled, whether or not they get paid for it, whether or not they have to give up their whole day for it. But I think we can all relate to this. When we do something that we're just in what most people will call the flow state, where we're just going through it, at the end of the day, we were like, where did the day go? But we were so entrenched in what we were doing. We're like, hey, that felt great. And I feel that doing this podcast, I feel that talking to people when we have our potlucks, when we get to interact with people, the time flies. How many times have we been in situations where we're talking and then we're like, whoa, 5 hours just went by? Well, why is that?
Yeah.
Because we enjoy what we're talking about and we enjoy each other's company. So I think that's powerful.
And I think also we ourselves also are at fault, right? We tend to fall into the same way of asking questions. We don't, right? When we meet someone new, the default is to just ask these kind of meaningless questions, right? What do you do? Where do you go on vacation? Those are very shallow, right? And we ourselves have to get better at asking different type of questions to allow the person that we're talking to, right? If we're on the path to seek a mentor, asking them what they do is not enough.
What's your favorite color?
Right. It's almost like you need to get drill down a little bit deeper, and learning
Right.
how to ask questions is so important, right? To get to know who this person really is. I almost feel like instead of asking what do you do as for a living, it should be more like what do you like to spend your time on, will be maybe a even better question, right? So it's kind of take them out of that identity, the typical box, and immediately gets them into a different category where, okay, well, how do I spend my time? Well, that's a different question, right?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I think that problem is actually twofold. It is one with the question we ask, but I also think it has to do with this, what our society deems as normal conversation. Because I'll speak for this for myself. When I was in the dating world, or when I was in college trying to make friends, I didn't really care what you do for a living, or what your favorite color was, or what your favorite food is. I mean, you find that stuff out naturally. I would always ask the questions that would be, all right, if I gave you $1 million today, how would you spend it? Right.
Yep.
And most people don't know how to answer that question. Either A, they'll look at me like I'm crazy, like I'm just a homeless guy off the street, and they'll just brush me aside. Or B, they'll give me an answer that they think is acceptable. Oh, I'll buy a house. I will travel. They'll give the generic answers, but no, I'll ask them, what would you do with that money? Not what someone else is telling you to do. And it's those questions that are, you can call them icebreakers, you can, however you want to define them, but sometimes the other person on the other side has to be receptive. And that right away, if I ask the question, people that I meet now, if I ask them a question like that, based on their response, before they even answer the question, I'll know, all right, this person is insightful and I can have these kind of mind picking conversations, or this is just going to be a shallow and superficial conversation. Not that there's anything wrong with that person. Sometimes people don't know the questions that they don't know how to ask yet, but someone who's at least willing to answer the question and say, oh, that's an interesting question. I think it's great.
Oh my God, it's so funny because I was just yesterday telling my daughter that, she's getting older, so eventually she's going to be starting to date. And I said, one of the best question I asked your dad when we were dating was, if you won a lottery for $1 million, what would you do with that money? I can't believe we asked the same question.
Right.
Okay.
I was reading it in I forgot where. I remember I told you this a couple months ago. It was either Die with Zero or 4,000 Weeks. It was probably 4,000 Weeks. I remember this because I was reading the book and it was late at night and my wife was about to go to bed, and I had asked her, I said, hey, I have a question for you. I said, if I gave you $1 million right now and I told you you have to spend it in the next 30 days, and you can't save it, you can't invest it, and you can't buy a house, how do you spend those $1 million? I read that question and I was like, I have absolutely no idea how to answer this question. No idea. My wife, a little bit easier because she's a little bit more goal driven. She has ideas of what brings her happiness and how money can be used to enhance those characteristics. But those questions are so, you can learn so much about a person. And I don't mean that in the sense that you can judge them, but you can learn so much about a person with that question.
Absolutely. And I still remember to this day, like exactly where I kind of have photographic memory. So that was to my advantage growing up. But I still remember the exact restaurant and how I was sitting, with Mike across from the table. And I asked that question and he was just floored by it. And and his response was very insightful. And I follow up with the question like, why, and
Yeah.
he wants to buy if he wanted $1 million, he would first, go and make sure that his parents, bought a house for them and set them up. And I asked why. And that is how I got to know him on a like much deeper level, right?
Yep.
Than just this guy who's, taking me out to dinner. And yeah, I love that's why, we have
Yeah.
hours of conversation no matter where
Right.
we go. And our potlucks, that we do with our mastermind group, we talk about strategy and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, this is what we help people do: drill down to that peel off those outer layers of conventional thinking, and let's drill down deeper and see what we're really all about. And when we have those core values defined, established, this journey to be our better self, or for me, this journey right now is about transformation, is going to be that much more meaningful and impact.
Yeah, and I think tying it back into the podcast being the fact that we're asking those questions and we're
Mhm.
asking them of ourselves, we're asking them of our audience, but also we're going to be asking them of our guests and the type of guests that we're going to be having on that are going to be discussing their specialties, right? We're going to talk about people who have creative ways of doing a mortgage, right? How you can pay off your mortgage in under 5 years by using a certain strategy. We'll talk about the infinite banking concept, which is something that I know you're very well versed in, you and Mike, but also for people who don't know about it, it's something that is a generational and a fundamental question that once you're able to ask that question and see how you can incorporate that into your life, it changes the lens with which you view the financial world, but also your world in general. So being able to talk about those strategies, being able to just talk about people who are in real estate, who have had experience with buying businesses, just different opportunities that then when the goal with that is that as more and more people listen, as the audience can talk and hear from multiple people, then they can take these pieces and think, okay, I like that idea. I like that concept. Let me see how that can flow into what my financial goal is as an individual and how that can identify my identity matrix of what are the things that I want to do with my time and with my life. And that's what we're trying to aim to do with this podcast is ask the questions of ourselves because we're on this journey. I mean, we're
Yeah.
asking the questions rhetorically, but also actually to ourselves because we're asking ourselves these questions on a daily basis. Like this podcast isn't just a way and a means to give people the tools and the answers to go on their journey. This is part of our own journey of exploration. And so we're along with the audience that's joining us. We're asking the same questions and we're trying to find those answers. No, it's fun.
Yeah. Look at this. We're giving financial advice, fitness advice, dating advice.
Stay tuned. Stay
Yeah,
tuned.
exactly.
I
We
definitely
got it
think
all.
we'll definitely have an episode I think on just relationships in general. And I'm not talking again not just romantic relationships, but just relationships with people. I think we kind of briefly touched on it with this kind of interesting, weird question to ask people. But it becomes when you start identifying your identity and knowing who you are, well, then the next challenge is finding people who fit into that. And I think that it's, in my opinion, from my experience, it's a lot easier when you're less introspective and more shallow to get along with more people because the likelihood of you having more in common when you're more introspective goes down because
Mm.
you're filtering out already when the general public don't really ask those questions. If it's very simple, in my opinion, just go to a bar, go have a couple of drinks, and you can meet people very easily and just talk about random things. Alcohol will be the lubricant for a social life and it makes it a lot easier. But if you're going to a coffee shop and you're having a cup of tea or having a coffee and you're just there, it's a little bit more awkward to talk to somebody at a coffee shop or on the street because you don't know what they're thinking. So that's something that I think is beneficial to learn about how to develop and enhance quality relationships.
This reminds me, which we can talk about the next episode. There was a infographics that floated around a while back about the difference between a poor person, a rich
Yes.
person, or yeah, poor
Yeah.
person, rich person, and a wealthy person, and they gave the characteristics of what this person would
Right.
do. at first glance, I was kind of offended, right? Some of the stuff that I was mentioning, I was like, oh, look, what are they
Yeah.
saying that? I because I'm funny, then I'm poor. So,
Yeah.
but some of the stuff, let's bring it up next time
Yeah.
and
I
let's
think though,
go through it. I think that'll be so fun because some
yeah.
of the stuff I truly do believe, like
Yeah.
what you were saying, the people that you surround yourself with, quality versus quantity. Yeah,
Yeah.
and who has your
I
best interest at heart? Time will tell.
definitely. I love it. Yeah. So I think for the audience to take away from this episode, for the high school graduates, for the college graduates, for whatever stage of life you're in, looking at the next 5 years, some key fundamentals that you can start implementing now to really transform the next 5 years of your life. Finding a good mentor. I think that we talked about that. That's such a huge and powerful place to start, because don't try to DIY it. Find somebody who's in the position, maybe not identical position, but who is financially where you want to be, who's physically fitness wise, how you want to look or how you want to feel, and just learning from them, absorbing from them. And then with that, asking critical questions, not only of the mentors, but also in general of information. As you go into this world, or as you're expanding in this world, you're going to be bombarded by information, especially on social media, telling you what the right thing to do is. And that could be with your finances. Oh, go into a 401k. No, go into an IRA. No, don't trust the government. Put your money in a couch. Buy gold. Buy crypto. Right? There's all this information in the fitness world. It's the same thing. Oh, go keto. Go omnivore. Go this. Go that. All these different diets. Take all that information and ask the questions of yourself and how that can be fitting for you. And then lastly, identifying your identity. Right? Maybe looking up there on the term identity matrix, and maybe doing your own identity matrix and seeing, really reflect on yourself and say, where do I get my main source of my identity from right now? And if you don't know how to answer that question, that's okay. Just write down the few things that come to mind and think about who you want to be, and start coming up with some strategies of how you can implement your newer identities. And I think those are three really key and powerful things. And moving forward, we'll have guests that we can bring on who will discuss multiple different topics that will help you hopefully ease your mind and make it easier to reach both your fitness and your finance goals. So anything
Yeah,
else you want to finish on, Pei?
expand that mind. Well, we're
Yeah.
all about expanding that. We don't know all the answers. Obviously, we are on the journey to seek to the next level.
Yep.
And if along the way we can help others, right? That's great. But ultimately, we both are similar in a sense, right? That we are very, very driven. No matter what we are, we kind of get fixated, but that's where we are, and we're very excited to have be able to put this information out there and also see what happens.
Yep. I love being on this ride, and it makes it better that we're riding on this together. So again, Pei, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Stay tuned for some new content coming up shortly. Take care.
Take care. Bye bye.